We welcome you all back to the channel, as today we have a slightly different video. Recent events in South Africa and Australia has led to a lot of interesting discussions surrounding the future of the oldest format of the game, Test cricket. Today we are joined by both Archie and Lucas to talk about what on earth is happening to Test cricket. So make sure you strap yourselves in. This could be an interesting one. But anyways, Lucas and Archie, hope you're doing well.
All good, fella.
Yeah, all good. Thanks, mate. How are you?
Both of you. Get any netting done in the snow by any chance? Or was that just me?
I was indoors today, mate. Indoors.
Always indoors.
You didn't count.
Privileges. Anyways, we're going to kick off with a recent test match at Newlands, which was famous or infamous for many reasons. One of which there was 23 wickets on the first day, which was almost a record, I think, third highest or something. And the game basically ended in 4 sessions. But we'll start off with the test cricket that is actually still happening. Do you think pitches like this are good for the game, or like will it make it more exciting, or is just a session, 4 sessions of test cricket not actually helpful for viewers? Do you want to kick off, Lucas?
Yeah, look, I think obviously whenever you have that many wickets in a day's play, it is obviously entertaining, but it kind of kills off the 5-day aspect of the game, which allows the game to really develop and the game to ebb and flow as well, really. And I think, as I said, I think it just takes away from it. As much as it is entertaining, you do want to see a bit more parity and a bit more balance in between the two disciplines.
Archie, do you agree that possibly such short test matches means that the quality or maybe even standard of a 5-day game isn't the same as it used to be?
I'll be honest, I think 2-day test matches are rubbish. I don't think.
Yeah, but why is that?
I think I'll go on to it. I think that I don't think anything's going from there. They're 2 days long. The test match is meant to be 5 days. It's either it's a mixture of things. It's kind of the way the game's played now, and it's the pitches, and it kind of swings so much that there's no equilibrium. I think the best games of Test cricket is when there's an equilibrium between bat and ball v bat, and I just don't think you get that, and you don't get the spectacle. Test cricket at the end of the day is a spectacle. You don't get a spectacle when one kind of, in this case, bowlers are so much more dominant than batsmen, and the same way at places like when you play at Rawalpindi, when you can't get wickets on those decks because they're like so flat. I think you've got to have an equilibrium, and 2-day test matches go too far to the bowler side, as the same way that test matches such as Rawalpindi, when they're 5 days long but you get 3 innings, I think that goes the other way, completely the wrong way. And it's the way it is that unless one team kind of has the bollocks to go after it and try and blitz the kind of hit the ball as far as they possibly can, or kind of be very aggressive within the game, and you're not going to get competitive games. You're not going to, and this is what it is. If one team starts better, more often than not, the team that starts better will win the game. And it's just there's no ebb and flowing of the game, sadly. I think that's the key thing to take away, and the thing that I don't like about these 2-day test matches.
But both of you, why do you think we're getting, or it seems like we're getting a lot more 2-day test matches or 3-day test matches nowadays than seems to have happened in the past few years before that?
Look, I think when it comes to the fact that we're not seeing as many 5-day test matches, it's purely because, well, one of the reasons is, people are starting to score a lot faster, and there's a lot less weight on a player's wicket. I feel like the fear of failure is very quickly being removed from the game. And the fear of failure isn't a good thing. However, it's not necessarily the fear of failure that will kind of. It's not necessarily thanks to that these teams and these players can be successful in Test cricket. In that, for example, you look at this series, right? You look at the people who've really applied themselves, like the likes of Elgar and Rahul. They did score big runs. I know that was at Centurion, and then obviously at Newlands there needed to be a different approach because of the poor nature of the pitch. But you can really see that the rates of scoring are really jumping. And you look at Test matches in England now. How often do you ever see an overseas player score 100 there? I mean, the ball's swinging so much. Batsmen don't really mind having a big booming drive at it early in their innings, and they just don't seem to put as much respect on their wicket.
Agreed. Go on, Archie.
I counter that to a little bit. I think pitches in England have got a lot flatter as of late. We've had a
There's
lot
reason
more.
for that,
You've had a lot
right?
more. Yeah, I mean, it's partly because of Stokes. He asked for it, but you have a
Yeah.
lot more kind of overseas players scoring. Tanya, who you have last year? Labuschagne, Kawaja, Smith, Marsh. Before you had Blundell, and Mitchell. They were from my top of my head. They were all very proliferant. But I think it's really. I don't think it's necessarily for a failure. I think it's teams almost doctoring pitches. I think if you look at the three occasions that come to mind, you have Ahmedabad, England v India. You have South Africa v Australia in Australia, which is possibly the exception, and you have India v South Africa. All of those teams, I think India maybe less so because they're so dominant at home, but those pitches are looking to suit the conditions of the home nation. You've got the last Test match that's probably favouring more South African bowlers rather than Indian bowlers because they don't have the plethora of kind of strong pace attacks. Whilst at the end of the day, it hasn't helped them. And then you have Australia again, kind of they're so strong at home. Again, it's not really a big factor. But I guess the nature of that pitch again still helps the Australian quicks, particularly against South Africa, because South Africa's batters are fairly useless. I think it's more looking to gain an advantage at home, especially when you have things like the World Test Championship, which basically means there's higher stakes for each Test match. So they look to kind of gain an advantage from that.
All right.
Yeah, I also don't think it's necessarily a new thing. You look at maybe the nature of the games have got quicker, but I mean, if you look at games in like the 1970s and 80s with the Windies, those decks they played on, it's always been a case where teams build pitches to suit their own benefits and look to gain an advantage. So I think that's kind of very normal of cricket. I just think it's maybe just slightly got worse at the minute, but I think that's partly also because world batting globally at the minute has got worse. And I think with the two in hand, bowlers have improved, batters have got worse, pitches have relatively stay the same. But when you have pitches that suit a home attack, they just run riot. And I think that's what happened a lot of the time, barring this last Test match because South Africa are so useless at batting.
Almost, but yeah. So what we're trying to say is, are you basically putting the point across that it's not that much different, except that the nowadays, because the game just moves so much quicker with Bazball and whatever, like Warner scoring quicker. Basically, almost everyone scores quicker, except Imam ul Haq, obviously. But essentially, what it is that a 5-day Test match, the same amount of cricket has basically been condensed into 3 days and just happened quicker. Wickets fall quicker, runs are scored quicker. Everything just happens faster.
Not really, to be honest. I'd say I think the pace of cricket has slightly improved. I mean, but it's exceptions, really. I think England are an exception to that. We play the game very quickly. But even with England games, they don't necessarily. I don't know. There's not been many games that are finished in 3 days. But I think it's more the pitches. The pitches are just being used to gain an advantage from the bowling attack, and the bowling attack just can exploit that. I'd say the skill of batting globally has diminished. You look at the three attacks that have been skittled out in that time: South Africa twice, and England in India. I mean, obviously, Joe Root taking 5 for 8 is not a great sign, but they're not England team at that time and the South Africa team as of late are not very proliferant batting attacks. Therefore, I think it's just they've been outskilled, but on a deck that kind of, as I said before, doesn't go on the equilibrium, but tends more to bowling sides, and with stronger bowling attacks globally, they're just able to exploit that.
Obviously, Bazball and everything has almost cut the draw out of the game. So with games ending, possibly majority of games ending within 4 days or just about reaching the 5th, do you think that's good for the game that draws are happening less and that we're getting more results-based Test matches? Because people in England seem to love it, mainly because England are winning. But do you think that it's overall a good thing for Test cricket and moving forward?
Look, I think the big difference between, or the main reason we all love Test cricket is because it has that extra element of the potential result of a draw. I mean, you know, you look over the last few years, the lack of draws there have been, especially from, I mean, teams like England who have really taken a forward approach to the game and who have openly said how they really want, they're only going to look to win. And if they can't, if it doesn't work out, they'll lose. And for me, that takes out a really, really special element that you don't get from the other formats. And there's actually a lot of pride to be taken from batting out the last day and a half of a game and really being able to show the opposition that you're not going to go down without a fight, even if you're completely on the back foot. And I think there's a lot to be admired in acquiring a draw.
Fair enough. Do you agree or not? Really?
Kind of. I think I agree that the draw is a key part of cricket, Test cricket, and I think I agree it can be an admirable event. But I think I don't necessarily. Obviously, England, the way they play takes out the draw, but the factor of the draw is still there. Just because there is still the time element, like you look in when we play Pakistan on that first test against Rawalpindi, it's very fat deck. England obviously still win the game, but I think that there's still the time element naturally gives the fact of a draw. Just because they play the way they do, it doesn't take it takes the draw out of the equation, sure, but I think just the mere presence of there being a draw kind of does the job in itself. I think I get what Stokes is saying. We're always going to go for the win. I do also think if there's certain situations, they will not. If they're 6 down with one, or 9 down, or 8 down with one session to go, you're not going to see Jimmy Anderson trying to blast 36 and over if they need 200 in the last session. I just don't think they're not stupid. They're attacking. They're ambitious. They're not stupid. I think that just the mere presence of the draw does its job in itself, and I think I agree with Lucas. It's a key integral part of Test cricket, and it's the thing that kind of almost makes Test cricket almost as unique as it is. I think with the 5 days and the possibility of there being a draw is so unique in itself that it does its job. It does its job.
Yeah, fair enough. But talking about draws, one team that probably isn't going to have a draw in Test match cricket anytime soon is South Africa, and more so that now they've decided they're going to send a C team over to New Zealand. And my question is, what is the integrity of Test cricket? Like, at what point do we still call it a Test match when sides are not putting out their strongest side, their strongest team, their strongest 11 players to win a game, especially away from home?
Well, look, for me, I think it all boils down to how much cricket South Africa cares about Test cricket. Obviously, you can talk about the finances and whatnot, but about 10 or so years ago, Cricket South Africa decided to give up one of their seats on the council in preference towards a slightly favourable, shorter term option to improve their domestic white ball stuff, which hasn't happened anyway. And it's actually diminished their ability to play a lot of Test matches, like the big three, like the likes of England, India, and Australia. I think that what Cricket South Africa have done by picking that squad is completely out of order. I can understand the benefits of the SA20, but you're really sending a message out by selecting a squad like that you want no part in bettering and furthering South Africa's status in Test cricket, and basically throwing away the opportunity to bring through these amazing players that South Africa do have in the first class system. And you look at the last few years, like Archie's mentioned, and you have yourself, the batting side of things especially needs some improvement. I mean, we've always got the bowlers. It's more so the batting development is not quite there from a domestic point of view. And as much as there are players there, they're not necessarily prepped and taught and brought through properly to be able to excel at that highest level. And I think once that happens, when you've got a lack of youth coming through and you have these sort of extenuating circumstances, like having to prefer a T20 competition ahead of a Test series, you really do start to have problems.
Agreed. Mullen, I was going to ask you, so when obviously previously going by and even nowadays, you'll turn on the TV, you'll see a Test match and you'll see Sri Lanka or Zimbabwe or Bangladesh at home, and it might be a big side they're playing against, but often you still find yourself tuning in because you think this side has got their best 11 players out at home and the opposition are going to put their all in to win an away Test match, because let's be honest here, no matter where you're playing, to win a Test match away from home is still a pretty big deal because you have to be that good across that length of time. But at what point does it actually lose its joy, where you look at a team and you think the other team aren't trying? Because unlike in a T20 or an ODI, when you rest players or you don't pick certain players in a test match, it's so much more evident across 4 days that if you're not putting in your full effort, the joy of test match, it just kind of fades away, and the test match doesn't feel like a test match anymore. Where does the line stand for you on that?
I mean, I agree. You know, you said earlier about when can this be deemed as a test match series. I'm almost of the belief it can't, because it's almost as if South Africa A are touring
Yeah.
New Zealand, not even South Africa A, South Africa B, or South Africa might as well send the under-19s over there just to get some experience. It's like they did this. South Africa do this a lot. They're obsessed with the SA20, and I understand why, because of they're not the richest country in the world when it comes to cricket. Not the richest country in the world in general, really. But in terms of a cricketing standpoint, it's like they have no preference and they have no priority of Test match cricket. They want to prioritize, in my opinion, as franchise cricket, gimmick cricket. They want to prioritize this league when really Test cricket and a competition, a live competition, they don't care. They don't want to send their best players. Maybe they do, but they're not. You know, they're not. They didn't. I guess there was the whole thing about they tried to get it moved. It wasn't moved. But either way, at the end of the day, you still have England do it. When England have Test series at home, the Test team don't play in the 100. They play in the Test match cricket. South Africa just don't want to do that. They don't want to prioritize, even if it's a 13, 14 man squad. They don't want to send them over there because they want to invest in this series. And I don't believe that can be deemed a test match, because if you're not sending, and it's not two countries going out there with the best 11 available or the best 13 available, whatever, whether you rotate players, I don't think it's that important. But if you're not sending your best players out there to give you the best chance of winning, it's almost as if they're just there for experience. And I think it's very sad, and I think it's a load of bollocks.
I'll just to add to that very quickly. I can kind of see where Cricket South Africa would potentially be coming from if they had brought through and put these young players into the test squad to actually, give them test match experience. I know it may not end up being a very competitive series, especially with it being away from home.
No.
But look, at the end of the day, Cricket South Africa has had this problem for ages. They keep playing the same old, tired, washed players, and it's really hurting. Really hurting the. It's really hurting the whole country and the whole team. And I just feel like South Africa needs a fresh start. And had they brought in, this was their opportunity to really push these young players through and give them that test match experience and see how much they can handle, and hopefully bring through a very promising group of young test cricketers for South Africa.
Yeah, one second, Archie. I mean, before you get into this, I can see already there's a split of opinion here, and I think it mainly stems from Archie being a big England fan, and South Africa, who obviously Lucas is a fan of. They're obviously not a big three nation, so financially, countries that are not India, Australia, or England, they almost have to have different priorities than Test cricket. So England and Australia will almost always have enough demand for Test cricket because the Ashes is so big. That's literally the whole point of being an England cricketer. No matter what you win, your whole career is defined on the Ashes. As a coach, everything is defined on the Ashes. So there'll always be that demand there, and they'll be all right financially on that side. And India just makes so much money anyways from the IPL or whatnot that they can afford to just keep going into Test cricket. Whereas countries like South Africa, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, West Indies, and basically pretty much everyone else can't afford to do the same sacrifices that England did, as you said, with not playing their best players in the 100, or what Australia do by almost basically their test players or their best players basically never play the Big Bash anyways. But South Africa probably can't do that, and probably Pakistan can't either. That's why you don't have test matches scheduled, or even international matches scheduled when they have their domestic T20s on.
I agree with Huz. I completely agree. But the only thing I would say is, why have they scheduled it at the same time? It's a 2 test match series, am I right?
Yeah,
Two
but
test
they
matches.
That's kind of what Cricket South Africa was saying, going back to how they tried to get it moved and it just wouldn't happen.
But
They said when these fixtures had kind of been announced that they didn't know the kind of time frame for when the SA20 was going to be played, so they couldn't really make plans until the last minute. Don't get me wrong, I'm not defending Cricket South Africa. Well, I'm defending them for this, not for the team selection.
It's not as if the Cricket of South Africa, they run the SA20. They have the complete say over it. If they want to play it there, they want to play it there. It doesn't matter. It's their choice.
No. But they didn't know. They didn't. No. The reason is, right, they didn't, when they basically, the scheduling of the next 5 years of Test cricket happened in 2022 from, I think it was for 2023 to 2027. And when those dates were released, SA20 wasn't even conceived. So they couldn't actually quantify and know when they were going to be able to bring it into play.
There is a window. I'm not entirely certain on South Africa's schedule. You'll probably know more than me. But surely there's a window in there. How long is this? 23, 4 weeks?
Yeah, it's a month.
It's a month. It's a month. There'll be a month in there. Whether they do it like England, they take it out of their domestic summer, but there's a month somewhere in there where they can play. It's not as
apparently there wasn't. So the whole point is there wasn't. So they had to.
No, but I think that's just the sorry. To be honest, I mean, I might get a bit of stick for this, saying, "Oh, you don't know the schedule." I think that's a sorry excuse. I think there is a time for South Africa's. You have quite a long season, don't you? It's not like a short.
No, actually, look, I agree.
There's a window for it. Whether it means the Test players miss out on the first 4 games of the SA20, so be it. There is a window in there. Whether South Africa want to admit that or not, that there's a window where there's a balance, and they're openly avoiding the balance to prioritise the money which the SA20 can bring in. That I don't think that's negotiable.
And the money that they need, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
I don't think it's as black and white as you're making out. Obviously, I agree that there's absolutely, I'm sure there's a way they could have done it, even if it was to sacrifice a few games for the main players in the SA20. Like you said, it's only 13, 14 players. Get on with it. Stick some of the youngsters in the teams for once. You know, I completely agree with that. But I don't think they would have just completely binned it off and thought, "No, we can't be bothered with this. We're just going to say that we can't fit it in, and so be it."
I agree with Lucas where I feel like they could have done better, but they looked at it and basically realized we're going to have to sacrifice a bit more of something here. And they basically went, we're going to have to sacrifice a bit more of this particular test series so we can get the SAT20 in. But moving on, Lucas isn't the only angry South African. There was a bloke on YouTube who basically said that he was shocked that there weren't 3 tests arranged, and that he basically blamed it all on T20 cricket. And the bloke I'm talking about on YouTube was not me or Lucas. It was Abraham Benjamin de Villiers. Never heard of him. But yeah, where's that? Nah, no idea, mate. Apparently he played a bit. But apparently he wasn't the only one who was angry about the length of the test series in particular, which South Africa obviously shortened for the SAT20. That's why they didn't have a 3rd test. Ravi Shastri was furious. He almost, I think he said something along the lines of like, if I were India, the next time South Africa say, "Oh, we'll have 2 tests," I just wouldn't bother going. Do you think that 3 tests is
that's because they can't win there
for it nowadays, or do you think 2 tests can still work?
Look, I think I completely agree. I mean, you look at the amount of Test cricket that South Africa are going to be playing in the next kind of scheduled period of the next 4 years. It's really poor. I mean, obviously, the 2nd test wasn't what anyone sort of wanted in terms of the length of the game. But for me, South Africa, as a cricketing nation, as a place to play cricket, is probably, and obviously could be biased, but is the most.
Will be biased.
Yeah. Look, if you apply yourself with the bat, you can score runs. If you bowl well enough in the right areas, you can take wickets. It's the most fair playing field you can almost get in the world of Test cricket. And for me, obviously, you look at the last test, that wasn't the case. But you look at the Centurion game and series prior to that, you can clearly see that if you apply yourself, you can score runs, and if you bowl in the right areas, you take wickets. It's as simple as that.
By bowl in the right areas, you mean as long as you're a seamer, right? Because if you're Keshav Maharaj, you might as well just play away tours. Am I correct?
Hang on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, go on.
You don't have spin. The spinners can't really do anything in South Africa. I also think that isn't there like a ridiculously low batting average in South Africa?
Not actually. It's actually
No,
all right.
no.
It's
The
all right.
first session. It's just the first session of Cape Town in particular.
Yeah. And I
It's
just to add to that, I agree spin plays practically no part within the first 3 days of the game. But historically, especially at grounds like the Wanderers, spin does come into the game quite regularly.
The best ground, the best country in the world to play Test cricket.
The most balance, yeah. It's got the most balance for everyone. Look, I'm not saying it's the best playing nation by a mile. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's the best. It's the most fair and most even conditions to play Test cricket in.
This might be an interesting thing. I think Australia's up there. To be fair.
Yeah, I agree.
Australia. The thing is, Australia just promotes good cricket. But the thing is, Australia are better than everyone at cricket, so it just seems one-sided. But it's not that one-sided. They're just better than everyone.
Maybe shocker here. Maybe because their pitches are good, that they're actually good and better than everyone else. Possibly, I don't know.
England have got better.
Yeah, but the point is, talking about this while we're on it, because the English county wickets are just basically, as a spinner, you might as well not play. And you're basically, I saw a stat somewhere where seam bowling averages below 85 mile an hour are like well better than above 85 mile an hour. So basically promotes slower bowling than just the dibbly dobblers. I've heard that name somewhere.
I mean,
but what I'm trying to say, because Australia have such top quality pitches, they can promote better Test cricketers through their domestic system, whereas England have to do stuff like picking people who don't actually do well in Test cricket, because you can't actually tell from the county championship who will be good when it comes to a Test match.
Yeah, I mean, that's also noticeable, I think. With the spinners, you look at players like Tom Hartley and obviously like Callum Parkinson. They're a couple of England's best spinners, and they average in the mid-30s. You know, how many spinners are there that average below 30? The only one that actually comes... You've got a couple, I think. Dan Moriarty, I think he's down there, and I think Amar Verdi also. But at the same time, neither of them actually played cricket at Surrey. There's no kind of spinners because the decks just don't promote it. There's no good. I mean, the oval's quite. I'll give the oval. The oval's just a road usually, to be perfectly honest. But there aren't that many good. There aren't that many good decks that are balanced at in Championship cricket. I mean, the bigger Test playing counties, I think they usually have slightly better decks, but there's no point for like Leicestershire, Worcestershire, Gloucestershire really to promote good cricketing decks. They just care about their counties because they're not a big enough ground to get Test cricket. So it's just, I think
which
that it is. I agree with you. I don't think the pitches are the pitches don't really promote that. But also at the same time, I guess part of that also is how small the first class system is in Australia compared to England. England have 18 counties. Australia have, how many is it? 5 or
6? Yeah, it's certainly
it's like a ridiculously small amount compared to England, which means they ultimately always play on in fairly big grounds and fairly good decks with good groundsmen. That also
fair enough. Yeah. And on the topic of county cricketers not actually playing red ball cricket, even international cricketers decide they don't want to play red ball cricket, because in the recent Australia-Pakistan series, Shaheen Afridi was obviously rested because his body was sore, but his body's always sore. What they really meant was he's rested because Pakistan have a T20 series coming up in New Zealand, for which he's the international captain. They've also got PSL coming up. He's also the captain of his franchise, Lahore Qalandars. And Haris Rauf, who was also in Australia at the same time, wasn't playing red ball cricket. He was playing Big Bash, because he basically said, I can't be asked with any of this red ball stuff. I want to play white ball, make sure I'm fit, and basically secure his finances, which is fair enough. But do you think players have reached the point in the modern day that they can decide that they can prioritize their own financial well-being over playing for their country? Because if you think about it, Shaheen Afridi probably grew up watching Pakistan playing Test cricket in the UAE in front of 4 men and a dog, probably. Whereas the only time he'll see actual fans at a ground would have been T20 cricket with packed stadiums. So why would people or players of the modern generation have a natural inclination towards Test cricket compared to obviously older players? There's no real reason for it, is there, Lucas or Archie? Anyone?
Well, I don't know about that. I think I'd say I disagree even, to be honest, because you think about it, Test cricket is the hardest form of cricket, and that's a non-negotiable, really. And I feel like for any player who really wants to test themselves and show everyone how good they are and how much of a legacy they want to have in the game, you need to be good at Test cricket. I think that's a given.
Of course, but then Archie, there's players like who was it, Somerset? That was it. Who's basically said no red ball cricket. How old is he?
20.
Yeah, and he decided this early in his career that he's going to go fully white ball. So I'm talking about players like him who have basically decided that they don't really think about red ball cricket the same way that older players do.
Look, I think. Yeah, go on, Archie.
Cheers, Archie. I'd say I think it depends on the player. It depends on the country. I think if you look at a lot of West Indian players, kind of countries often with poorer backgrounds, they're kind of the money incentives more there for them because they obviously want to provide for their family, and you don't necessarily get that in Test match cricket, which I think is completely understandable. But I also think a player like Will Smeed is never going to play first class cricket because the way he played doesn't fit it. I mean, but I think the large majority of youngsters would do it. I think I noticed something the other day. I think I heard Butcher say it about Dan Mousley. He said that Dan reckons if a player like Dan Mousley would not accept a contract from like a Major League Cricket franchise because it would dent his England chances. And I think I agree with that completely. I think a lot of young English players, if they had the opportunity to go off and play for like franchises and all these different various gimmick leagues around the world, I think a lot of them wouldn't take it if it would dent their England chances. I think you look at there's certain players, someone like Harris Ralph, his body probably isn't suited for Test match cricket, bowling 25 overs a day. If your body's not suited for it, it's almost an economic decision that my body's not going to be able to do this. Is there any point me investing in this, doing this, having a larger possibility of ending my career as a whole? I don't think a lot of them will do it. It's the same thing with Hales and Roy. Their techniques and the way they play aren't suited to Test match cricket, so they write off red ball cricket because the way they're going to kind of go down really is a white ball player across the world, and they'll go round the world kind of playing those leagues because they want to make their money. I mean, I don't think there are that many youngsters. Smeed comes to mind, obviously, but his technique, but he's like that. His technique won't suit red ball cricket because he goes so hard at it. Maybe it would. Maybe it'd find a balance. But there's a few. I think a lot of players, a lot of youngsters, like Harry Brook, for example, will obviously still want to play red ball cricket. And Liam Livingston's another example. He wants to play a lot of red ball cricket because it's where you define your legacy as a player. And I think a lot of players, when they get older, they might go off and not play, but when they're younger, they're focused on defining their legacy. And I think, in my opinion, that can't be replicated on a different stage than in Test cricket.
So just on that, Archie, I understand with like certain players are more suited to one format or more suited to white ball cricket. But what about the true superstars of international cricket, the players who are top tier across all three formats, not from England, Australia, and India, because players from those countries can still financially afford to play all of those. I'm talking about, obviously, say someone like Shaheen Afridi, what decisions does he have to make? Even someone from England like Jofra Archer, who has played Test cricket and has had so many injuries, at what point does he go, look, I've got a body that isn't always as reliable as I want it to be. Shouldn't I just shift all my focus onto white ball cricket and secure myself financially and make sure I'm still playing cricket rather than try and have another go at red ball stuff and injure myself? Or with Harris Ralph, another quick bowler. But do you think that with decisions like this being made, possibly, do you think it just lessens the caliber of cricketers that are available at the Test level across the like lower nations, not the big three financially?
I think it depends on the player, to be honest. I think someone like Jofra Archer won't play Test cricket, but I don't think his
Probably
body.
shouldn't.
I don't think his body can play Test cricket.
Mhm.
He's also someone who wanted and was hungry to play Test cricket, but his body wouldn't allow it. Harris Ralph's obviously had his not. I mean, he hasn't had that many injuries, I don't think, on the
No,
whole. But
he just
I
started
think,
his career later, so it makes sense that his
yeah,
professional career started a bit later. So it makes sense
yeah,
that he wants to get as
yeah,
much out of it as he
yeah.
can.
He also, I mean, he also hasn't played that much first class cricket on the whole.
I don't think he ever has.
He's played a Test match.
Yeah, but he hasn't played
He played a few games
domestic
for played a few games for Yorkshire. I think
Red Bull stuff.
I think he played Red Bull for Yorkshire.
Yeah, he
didn't
might have. Yeah, can't
Um,
imagine he played
but
any in
I
Pakistan.
think it depends on the player. I think it
Mm.
depends on their capabilities, their physical condition, and their incentives. Like, I think at the end of the day, some people want to play Test cricket, some people don't. You might get. I think a lot. What will happen more is we'll get players like what Trent Boult's done, where they
Yeah,
play a large proportion of their career playing Red Bull cricket, playing for their country, representing their country, and as they get older, they go,
that's
"Oh,
fair enough, though, isn't it?
I'm gonna do that." And I think that's where the game's going. I think that it's like semi-retirement. Chris Wokes has
Yeah,
actually done a similar thing off the books. I don't know if
away
you've heard,
test matches.
but
Yeah,
he's not going to play away Test matches, and I think
yeah.
fair enough.
So
I just think that's how the game's going to go. I don't
players.
I don't think players. I don't think players dislike. I think players still value Test cricket very highly. Someone like Virat Kohli's always said that his Test
Mm.
runs are the runs he values the highest. And I think it's the same with bowlers. Their Test wickets are what they hold the highest. And I think unless a player loses sight of that and they get money driven, I think Test cricket will still be. It's still. As I think we're going to allude on to, I think it's still the pinnacle. I think players still deem it as the pinnacle because first class cricket is so hard, mainly mentally and physically. I think it's so much harder that I think players will always play it because it's where you prove yourself.
So I'll pose the same question to you, Lucas. Say, for example, one of the quickest bowlers in the world, Nortje, he currently plays all three formats, or is at least trying to. How would you feel if he went, look, this is my body. I can't put in the same effort that I do across all three formats. I want to prioritize my white ball stuff. And we don't see him in Test cricket anymore for South Africa. How would that make you feel as a fan that you're not seeing the best player, one of the best players, one of the best fast bowlers in the world at that level? Would it just, as we were talking about earlier, Test cricket being a spectacle, best batters against the best bowlers, and if we're not seeing one of them are missing out, does it just take the bit of the joy out of it again?
Look, I think yes, obviously it does. It would be a huge shame to lose someone like a Nortje who bowls at 90 plus because it just brings that extra X factor and that extra excitement into the game. But I mean, it's already been mentioned. Like there are so many players who still want to play Red Bull cricket and Test cricket for their country, and I think we'll do a lot to facilitate that to make sure that they can play Test cricket for as long as possible. And you know, I think that is one of the reasons why Test cricket will get through this kind of uncertain period.
Yeah, on that, do we all agree that it is an uncertain period, or is it just a lot of noise made out of nothing really? Because Archie, how many Test matches are like the not big three countries meant to play in 2024?
Quite a lot, to be fair. More than usual. You have South Africa have got 11, I guess. New Zealand have 13, which is the third most. Zimbabwe 2, Ireland 5, Afghanistan 7, Bangladesh have 14. Sorry, that's the second most. Sri Lanka 9. Quite a lot, given that Australia, for example, only playing 10, which is less than Bangladesh, West Indies, South Africa, New Zealand, India, England. The only countries that it's more than are Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Ireland, and Zimbabwe. The last three, obviously, are not really, they haven't really played much Test cricket in the last 5 years. So I think, yeah, I mean, that quite a lot more than I guess people would have thought.
So on that, is it actually like a down period for Test cricket, or do we think a lot of people are just getting a bit defensive, which is natural because times are changing and players are trying to do different things and different stuff is happening in the red ball game? Do we actually think Test cricket genuinely needs saving? And like some people generally have fears that Test cricket will be like the 1800s where three countries just keep touring each other. Will that actually happen, or we all just getting a bit frantic because times aren't what they used to be, and there's just a different way about going things?
I mean, England, India, and Australia pretty much tour each other every other year.
Yeah, but as
England,
you said, the other nations.
but my point is, the other nations are playing a lot of cricket.
Yeah.
Yes. How much of that is necessarily down to their own financial decisions, I'm not entirely sure. Because of the World Test Championship, they have a more obligation to play it, because if they can do well in that, they go further. But no, I think obviously there's such a range. I think the fact that Bangladesh have 14 scheduled for this year, I think that's a good indicator. I mean, if they've got 14 Test matches scheduled, I mean, Bangladesh are probably not a country who you deem as an established Test match country. I mean, you have players in that team who've played 60 odd Test matches and been playing for 10 years. So I think that's a really good sign that there is still this hunger for countries and boards to play Test cricket. I think Test cricket will have a relatively defining next couple of years and next 3 years, I would say, really. But I think it's good. I think that the fact that there is still a lot of countries looking to play Test cricket, it shows there is still the board still look to play it. I mean, obviously the South African board God knows what they actually want to do. But I think the fact that boards like the Bangladesh board and the West Indies board, the fact that these countries maybe haven't had the best time of it, especially with the Windies, how good they were, but the fact they still are looking to schedule in Test matches is a good sign for the game.
But Lucas, on that, do you actually think, what sort of vibe does it give off? Is it Test matches for the sake of Test matches, just scheduling them almost like how bilateral ODIs and T20s have felt in recent years, where it just felt like they're there for the sake of it, where there's a lot of rotation players and stuff. Do you think Test matches will feel a lot more like that this year, where it'll just feel like they're there because they're there, or will it still have the feel of an international Test match? Where do you stand on that?
Look, I think Test cricket is so unique and so special that regardless of anything that could potentially derail it, it will stay strong and will have that entertainment factor. And you do look at the fixture list this year, and obviously, like, you see all these kind of lower tier nations playing all this Test cricket, which is wonderful, as you know, just helping to grow Test cricket and really help it gain an upwards trajectory again. Because I do think it has slightly been knocked off the list of priorities for some nations, including South Africa. But you do look at the fixture list and you see the likes of India playing England. Like that is just a box office series, really. That's what you want to be watching. I think Test cricket is fine for the foreseeable future, but you do need to keep implementing these things, like giving these lower tier nations more Test cricket, and keep producing these box office clashes as often as you can, and as often as they are at the moment.
Yeah, go on, Archie. You saying something?
Yeah. I mean, I think the English summer this year is a bit worrying. The fact that, I mean, it's slightly worrying that you have Sri Lanka and the West Indies coming. Sadly, neither of those series right now are box office series, and I think to keep Test cricket alive, we have to keep making box office series. It's also partly because England have tried to cram in 3 box office a year when you've had New Zealand and South Africa coming together, Australia coming, India coming. You've had everyone come pretty much in the last few years, which basically means that the nature of Test cricket is kind of, they have to play these teams, and I think I don't think there'll be a bigger audience really. But I think I agree with Lucas. I think the fact that Test cricket is Test cricket, it's just it has an aura pretty much. It pulls people in. Like you wouldn't go, for some reason, as a fan, I probably won't watch this Sri Lanka Zimbabwe series as an ODI series. I think it is right now.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's ODIs.
ODI and T20s.
Yeah, but I would watch them if they're playing Test cricket. I mean, obviously, the common cricket fan probably wouldn't do that, but I think Test cricket pulls you in, and I think no matter who you're playing, as long as the games are close, if it's a landslide, no one really cares. But if they're good games of cricket with good cricket being played, Test cricket pulls you in, and it has a way of doing that other formats don't do.
Yeah. As you were saying, you were quite worried on the English Test summer because they're having Sri Lanka and the West Indies, who aren't currently in such a good spot with their red ball cricket. But it's not really their fault, as in England's fault, that the other countries are in such a position. Because as we spoke earlier, I think the Test match, the FTP Future Tours program cycle comes out once every 5 years, doesn't it? So what it basically means is you can't predict where a Test side's going to be in 5 years' time.
No.
In a country like England, India, and Australia, being the big three nations, they've almost got. I feel like they have a right to make sure that all they're touring these nations, that those nations are touring England and Australia and India to make sure it doesn't turn. Test cricket should be played between all these countries, and it doesn't turn into a situation like similarly in football where people just want to people hated the idea of a European Super League because the fact that the best teams or the best nations are playing against each other all the time takes a bit of excitement out of it, because if it happens, like if all we see is England and India and Australia just touring each other, it kind of just like takes a bit of spice out of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. I think England has to tour these countries. They have in my opinion, they have an economic obligation to tour these countries because of how much money England have. They make money when England tour them, and India and Australia tour them. That's how the countries make their money, especially when you because England brings so many fans to every single Test match because of how loyal the Barmy Army are. Maybe not in Pakistan and India, but when you see England go to Sri Lanka and South Africa and New Zealand, they bring a large proportion of the crowd there are English fans, and that helps local economies and that helps the cricket board. I think that's key. I think the big three have to do that. I think they have an obligation. Maybe it's not in their economic interest as such, but that if countries die like South Africa and New Zealand and Sri Lanka, etc., especially the West Indies because of how kind of rooted their legacy is really.
Yeah,
that dies. I think the market for Test cricket dies. As a matter of fact, I think the market for cricket dies. I think, like, how much do people care about bilateral T20s and ODIs? Not that much. Whereas a Test match has
a Test series has its own story with it.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think, I think this they've got to keep the market, and the way they keep the market is by touring and playing cricket. And if they don't tour and they don't play cricket, even if the country's not as good, the game's going to die off. And it worries me a bit about Zimbabwe that none of the big three ever really go there to play Test cricket. I don't think in my lifetime we played Zimbabwe in even a bilateral ODI. I could be wrong there.
Not what I can remember, at least. Yeah.
Not that I can remember. And I think they've got to do that. They have an obligation to do that.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement there that. Oh, is that your dog?
Yeah, I think so.
Anyways, I think we're all in agreement that to make sure that Test cricket still has the aura of being Test cricket, these nations with legacies like Pakistan and West Indies, Sri Lanka, South Africa, New Zealand still need to be involved in it. Otherwise, Test cricket just won't be the same spectacle. But obviously, still keeping that alive, we still need to improve Test cricket, because if we don't, it will just fall behind inevitably. And there's been a bit of talk about how to improve it. I think it was Mark and Kawaja both suggesting that a big reason, obviously, as we spoke about players not wanting to play, is financially. They don't get the same out of Test cricket they do for white ball stuff. So they both suggested that the ICC could introduce like a standard match fee for Test cricket. I honestly don't see how that's going to work. But do any of you have any sort of other ideas to make it a bit more better for everyone else?
I think the money thing's a big thing. I think England pay their players quite a lot.
India
their individual match fees are quite big. I think that's a big reason why Rehan Ahmed obviously there's the legacy, but he obviously would earn quite a lot as a young player. I'm not quite sure if it's changed with the whole central contract business. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea, the standard match fee, but I think there's got to be some kind of economic input. There's got to be a boosted kind of central contracts. Where that funding comes from, whether it comes from the ICC, It's almost as if it's got to be like a charity.
Charitable test cricket.
The big three are donating to like Bangladesh to pay Mahatmadullah a bit more money. But I think that's one of the ways they could do it. They've got to money's got to come from somewhere, really.
Yeah.
The franchises aren't going to pay for it.
I mean, on that, there has been not a lot of talk, but the idea has circulated that obviously money needs to come from somewhere to pay for all these players to play Test cricket, even if they earn a similar amount of money to T20s or ODIs, not the same. I think even if it's close enough, these players with the aura of Test cricket will still like choose Test cricket.
Yeah.
But do you think there could ever be like a franchise Test league? As weird as it sounds, something like maybe the Saudis, Live Golf, something like that.
Absolutely not.
I hope
I think I think that would kill cricket. Let alone
Really?
Test cricket. I think that would kill cricket. Look.
the Saudis.
The only
Not that bad an idea.
look. There can't be a franchise Test. It just wouldn't work, because then you just get all this. You can't mix both of these worlds. They have to stay separate. It's not that wouldn't work. You know, that Test cricket holds so much value from being what it is in its core. You can't suddenly start change it. Well, you can change aspects of it. You can't just kind of flip the switch completely and have these mixtures of players. And it's also the other thing is with that Test cricket as it is now provides a huge amount of national pride. And in taking that away by making it a franchise sort of environment, that would be very, well, in my eyes, would be very detrimental.
Yeah, I think I'm going to pretend I never put that idea on the table, because apart from seeing the best players play Test cricket again, it doesn't really work otherwise. But I think that's all we've got for today. Let's just hope that, for our sake at least, the watchers, probably some of you at home, Test cricket does stay true to its roots, because it really is the best and oldest format for a reason. There's a reason it's been going on for 140 years. But yeah, let us know in the comments. Do you think Test cricket actually needs saving? And if so, how do we make it better? And what are your best Test moments? What connects you to Test cricket like it does to all of us? But anyways, that's all we've got for today. I'll see the rest of you maybe tomorrow, because the Dibbly Dobblers one has slightly been delayed, but that'll definitely be out soon. So see you all for that. See you later, Archie. See you later, Lucas.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate. Cheers.
Bye-bye.